We will get started here in just a moment. Today, we're going to be talking about the real reason why building your personal brand feels scary. And this is a topic that's really dear to my heart because 2 years ago, when I got started, a lot of these things were preventing me from showing up, like hiding my business from LinkedIn for a whole year, kind of showing up. So I'm really excited to share with you some key insights that have helped me once I realized them to overcome this, but not in a pep talk way, in a really structured way. But before we get started, we'd love to hear, where are you tuning in from today? I just checked in a few minutes ago. There were 120 people that raised their hand to be a part of this, which is super crazy exciting. But courtesy of LinkedIn, I can't actually tell how many of you are here right now. And there's no webcams. It's a one-way stream. There's no way to go off mute. So the only way for me to really tell who's here is through your comments. So we'd love to hear, where are you tuning in from? I know we got people from the US, from the UK, from France, but we'd love to hear it in the comments. Where are you tuning in from? And by the way, there is a short delay between when I'm talking here live in my office and when you hear me, and then getting the comments back. There's a few seconds of a delay. So if you see me or hear me reading your comments out loud like 10 seconds after you left them, just know that that's where that delay is coming from. So we'll give everyone a few more moments to join, and then we'll get started. Drop in the comments, where are you from? I know we got Cleveland, Ohio, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Awesome. Good morning, Manila, and hi, Patricia. So good to have you here. I know we have people from London as well joining. There's quite a few in my area in Seattle as well. And then we'll get started in just a moment here. Good morning, Jeff. So great to see you. Hi, Kate, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Awesome. Good morning, Hashani. I know we met. Yeah, I know you're from Seattle. Great to see you here. All right. So before we begin, this session today is specifically for founders and female founders who have real expertise, a real business, whether you're in the early stages of setting it up or you are further along and there are some things that are still preventing you from bringing your business fully online into LinkedIn or any other social media of your choice, and still struggling to make yourself visible in the market. So if that's you, you're in the right place. Warm welcome. And really the key focus, and what I've heard echo from so many people, and women especially, is, I know I'm so capable. Why does showing up feel uncomfortable? Why does it feel natural? And I see this with women who already have decades of experience, whether it's coming from corporate, academia, different avenues. You have real results. You are great at what you do. So why is it so hard to show up? Why is this so uncomfortable? And I want to invite you to an approach today that is not pep talk. It's much more looking at foundations that are perhaps not in place, things that are not clear, and some questions that you need to get answered before this becomes easier to show up. Hi, Karen. Good morning. So good to have you. Hi, Kenroy. What a lovely surprise. Oh my goodness. Karen from Jamaica. Amazing. Eileen, good morning. I know we're next door neighbors. Almost. So good to have you here. Patricia, I don't know if I'm reading your mind, but you're definitely not the first person to raise this. So you're in the right place. This is what we're going to be tackling here in the next hour. By the way, I'm going to be keeping an eye on the comments, but So I'm also focused on the presentation. If I miss your comment or your question, please do feel free to bring it back up at the end. I definitely want this to be a dialogue, such as LinkedIn allows. Although I can't see you or have you go off mute, I do want this to be a dialogue. So feel free to share your questions and your thoughts as we go along. And I'll do my best to keep an eye out on the comments as well. And then if I miss it throughout the presentation, we'll definitely come back to that at the very end. And today is not going to be a boring presentation where you just sit back and get bored to tears. This is going to be very much interactive. And I want to kick off with a few questions that are just like simple true or false questions. And I'd love for you to type in the chat T for true or F for false in just a moment. And this is part of excavating those things that, like, why is it so hard for us to show up, to build our personal brand? So just a few short questions, and then type in the chat T for true or F for false, and then bear with because of there's a bit of a delay between when you hear me talk and when I see your comments back in. So first question. Is personal branding mostly for influencers and content creators, not really for experts? What do you think? Does this feel true or false in what you're hearing, in the types of insights, suggestions, approaches, tips, tricks, like in everything that you're hearing around you? Does it feel like personal branding is mostly for influencers and content creators, not serious experts? Super curious for your perspective here. This is how we're going to try and not make it the Noemi monologue. So definitely look forward to your thoughts here. Is personal branding mostly for influencers and content creators, not serious experts? So type in the chat, in the comments, true or false, or T for true, F for false. And then we'll just give it a few moments with the delay between when I'm talking and when I'm seeing your comments come back. All right, getting some false. False one. Couple of false. Okay, amazing. Hi, Tracy. So good to see you. Corinne, also false. Okay. So this is false, but a lot of that advice has been presented to us in that way. But we as experts, we need a personal brand more than anyone else. We're not here to educate and entertain and go viral every day. We're here because our expertise has to be visible to the people who need it most, the people who are actually feeling called to help and to support. If they cannot find us, if they cannot see us, then we don't have a business in essence. So we need that personal brand to help with that communicating our value. And the more expertise you have, the more dangerous invisibility really becomes, because without a strong personal brand, people overlook your depth. Less qualified people, they are more visible often or get more clients, and your value gets underestimated as well, and opportunities pass you by quietly. So this is where we are not creators, we're not influencers, we don't need to be superstars and go viral every day, but we do need a strong personal brand that communicates our value and find a way that we can show up in our own way, not with advice that was made for other industries. Now let's look at another one. You have to be on every platform for your personal brand to work. You can see I really love tackling some of the big myths and the big assumptions, but these are part of the little things that are quietly sitting there in the back of our mind and keeping us from showing up, because we think, well, we have to be everywhere because so many people really are. So does this feel true or false based on what you've been told and what you see around you? I'm curious, even do you have multiple social media accounts? So I know I started with 2. I was like, I'm going to prove everyone wrong, show them I can do it. Did not work out that way. So LinkedIn is my home now. So true or false, you have to be on multiple platforms or on every platform for your personal brand to work. All right, we're getting some false. Love that. So this is false. And to make it really short and sweet, I'd rather you be great at one platform and really master it than to be mediocre on several. It's definitely not a matter of volume. Quality comes first. Your point of view, your thought leadership, the clarity of your message is the most important thing, because we don't need 50,000 clients in our business. Most of us cannot actually don't have that kind of bandwidth. So it's not about volume. It's definitely, hi, Barry, good morning. So good to see you here. False. Spot on. So we're looking for mastering one platform and show up fully, both with our full expertise and our full personality, and master that rather than being spread out on multiple. Patricia, appreciate the honesty. Feels like it, but I know it's false. Totally hear you. Let's keep going here. There's so much more I want to cover with you. What about having many different things? Having done many different things, does it make it harder to build a personal brand? I know so many of you have covered so much ground, many different disciplines, industries, fields. And when you're that multidimensional, does that make it harder to build a personal brand? When you have several lanes, several types of things you're great at. Oops. Apologies, I just skipped ahead one slide. But having done several things, I know a lot of you struggle with, well, but my expertise is so broad. How on earth can I bring it down to just one thing? So, having done many things, does it make it harder to build a personal brand? Bear with, as remember, I'm seeing your comments a few seconds after I'm actually talking live in my office. So, that's why you see me pause on this for a little bit longer. All right, having done many different things, it definitely feels harder. I hear you. I hear you, Manila. I actually had Manila and I used to work at the same company, and I had that same big question when I left. It's like, well, I've done so many things. How can I just narrow it down to one thing? And what is that one thing? Corinne, also true. And this is definitely true. It is harder. It feels harder, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. And I've done this with several women where it's actually the complexity, the depth, and the breadth is part of what makes you different. You just need to find the through line that explains that and clearly communicates that you are a stronger choice exactly because you've done all these things, but you need to know how these different things make the one stronger and make the other stronger. So when we have that clarity, it is easier for us to position ourselves in that way. So complexity is not the problem here. The problem is that complexity is not clearly positioned or communicated, and then the market cannot perceive it in a clear way, of course. So breadth is powerful when people understand how it all connects. What is the through line in that complex background? And when you can do that translation work for others, they understand it as well. Absolutely hear you, Corinne. Multi-hyphenate. And Tracy, sometimes it does feel hard. We have done so many things, and this is one of the things we're definitely going to pause on today. We're going to come back to this. Couple more questions here. Fear of showing up online, does it usually mean you're not ready yet? A lot of people feel that when you have that fear, it's like, well, if I was ready, it would probably just feel natural. I have an honest confession. I've actually been thinking of, while I'm waiting for your comments to come in, if this feels true or false. I've actually been thinking about hosting LinkedIn Lives for like 6 to 9 months at this point, and I was like, no, I just don't feel ready to come out, come out of the closet in yet another level. And I kept delaying it, and I kept delaying it, and then finally I decided to kick it off a few months ago. I was like, oh my gosh, the moment I hit go live the first time, it felt just as scary as 6 months before when I had the idea, and I've been delaying this for what reason? It feels just as scary. Like even 5 minutes ago before I came live, it was like, okay, come on. we have to do this. Showing up, it would be so much easier to cancel. Is it still possible? Like all these things. It doesn't mean that everything becomes easier. What does become easier is we build a highway for us to show up because we worked on the structure and the infrastructure that makes this easier. So some of it doesn't really go away, that fear of showing up, but feeling ready, we don't want that to stop us. I have certainly seen that feeling ready, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't come. It comes after taking the action, after we get uncomfortable and we still show up. So, Tracy, spot on. No, that fear of showing up and waiting for us to feel ready, that actually means that our positioning still feels unclear. It feels fragmented. We don't know how to articulate our authority and what makes us an expert in our field. And our expertise, it hasn't clearly been translated to the people that we're trying to reach, especially if you're pivoting from having been in corporate or academia and you want to start your own business. You need to do that translation work to communicate your value to a different audience in a different way. So waiting to feel ready, you're going to see this the more we hang out. I don't do pep talks. I go and look at the structure. So when you don't feel ready, there's a structure below, underneath this fear that is still missing. And that is a strategy problem and a messaging problem. It's not a confidence problem. Yes, feel the fear. Readiness, readiness, absence of fear. Got it. It requires energy. It's easier to be in the background. Definitely. It's a lot easier to be in the background. But when we have a business that's built around our expertise, we are the face of that business. So we no longer get to be in the background. And I love Patricia. This is actually one of the big fears that I want to unpack today. One more here. Is the hardest part of building a personal brand, is it creating content? There's really no right or wrong answer here. I'm curious for your take on it and where you feel you're at. Is the hardest part of building a personal brand, is it around content? There's lots of different ways we can look at this, but I'm just curious for your take before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the presentation and what I wanted to share with you today. So is the hardest part of building a personal brand, is it creating content? What does it feel like for you? Super curious. Is the hardest part of building a personal brand, is it creating content? This is a big one that I really want to unpack, so I'm curious where everyone is at in the room here. Okay, getting a false. Also getting some true. Okay. Wanna get a couple more answers here before we fully unpack this. Okay, Patricia says, no, that's not the hard part. Actually, I'd love to hear what does feel like the hard part also. But just a quick true or false here before we go further. Okay, getting a mix of yes and no. So this one, the problem is that you're trying to start with content, and content is rarely the problem. What is actually hard is that the work before the content hasn't really been done. The foundation of the positioning, the clarity, articulating your expertise, knowing how to build authority and demonstrate that authority. When those things become clear, content becomes dramatically easier. So building your personal brand starts before content, strategically and intentionally. Manila, I love the insight here. Creating content I'd want to share feels challenging. Also, it takes a lot of time to make good content. I hear you on that. But that is also, it's one of the things that we'll definitely talk about is getting that clarity on what we want to share, having structure, and having a clear framework of, well, what do we want to communicate? First, knowing that, so we never sit down to write content with a blank page, but then also knowing, well, how do we actually bring this to a post, to an article, to a blog, or any form of content newsletter that you might be writing faster and clearer? Solidifying a message that will resonate. I hear you. The hardest part is not creating content. The hardest part is keeping our content on brand. Love that, Tracy. And I know a bit more about you, so I know you're very much intentional in how you're building this. But yes, creating content, I mean, technically you could plug a few things into AI and get, the usual AI slop, it's starting to be called. So creating content is not the hard part, but creating it in a way that reflects really our expertise and our personality. And we definitely want to have that done intentionally. Now, I want to bring up a few slides, and I'm just quickly going to introduce myself, and then we're going to dive into the meat of what I wanted to share with you today. Let me know if you can see this. I believe this should be live now. So my name is Noemi. For those of you that don't know me and we haven't met, I'm blown away that I worked 18,000 some hours with some of the world's biggest brands like Coca-Cola and L'Oreal. And I'm still blown away that I helped them dig up what was already great about them, put the right words to it, and make sure the right people felt it. And I'm blown away that I get to do that today with professionals repackaging that corporate expertise, just like I have done a few years ago, into a new pivot or a new business. And it wasn't always that way. When I left corporate in April 2024, after a layoff, I was burnt out. I had zero plans. I don't come from an entrepreneurial family, so it wasn't like immediately, oh yeah, I got it figured out. I know what I'm going to do. I actually walked out of those walls carrying a resume that I was, really proud of, I was confident in, and it felt like it was mine. Like I did those things. But when I started my business a few months later and I wanted to, start sharing it with the world, with my connections, like nothing came out. Not because I didn't know enough, but because I didn't know how to package this, how to show up. Like no one teaches us that in corporate or in academia, or even if you've had a business offline for a few years and are thinking about, well, how do I bring all this stuff online? It is not an automatic. And what I realized is that all of my credibility, everything that felt strong about my background, it was borrowed. That credibility, doors that opened for you, meetings that were taken. It was because of the reputation of our employer back in corporate. It wasn't because of me personally. So I was like, well, who am I without these logos behind me? Out of everything I know how to do, well, how do I pick one thing? And how do I package that into an offer? What is the one thing? How do I communicate it? And none of this was clear to me. Weeks went by, then months, and at some point I was like nearly pulling my hair out. And I hid my business from LinkedIn for an entire year, even after I had clients, because I didn't know how to show up. I didn't know what was my voice. I didn't know until I really took the time to apply all this big brand knowledge to myself as a person, as an expert, and then start to excavate this and give it structure, give it a new container, because that corporate container disappeared pretty much overnight when I left, and I had to rebuild that. So eventually it all fell into place, but it took much longer than it needed to. So today I coach women entrepreneurs who have spent years building real expertise and are now wanting to build a business around it. So my job is to decode what makes you genuinely different in your market and build your brand around that from the inside out, not with a formula, not with a template, and what's already been inside you that entire time, your superpower, your perspective, your way of doing things with real strategy behind it so people can finally see it. So with that having been said, I want to talk about what is a personal brand and what is not. because there's a lot of mistaken assumptions because of what we're seeing around us. And everyone, like all of it's called like the LinkedIn bros, that type of posting, or the influencer, the viral creator type of posting. So let's actually demystify what personal branding is not for us as experts building a business around our expertise. It's not oversharing our personal life. Your personal life is yours, and it does not have to come into the business, not to a huge extent in any case. Promoting yourself all the time. I actually love this when this comes up, because personal branding, although it has the word personal because there's a personal touch to it, it's not about us. It's about, look at this other thing, this thing that I'm great at, and that point of view, that thought leadership. So it's less about us as a person. It's more about our knowledge that's really the product here. So we don't need to promote ourselves constantly. We also don't need to invent a personality. It's just about excavating what's already there and finding what's the way that is true to you to show up. This one took me a long time to figure out, like, what is my voice? How do I show up? I didn't even have a personality because it was washed away after over a decade of corporate. I knew how to be professional and polished, but I didn't know how to be me. Like, what do you mean, be me? Just the me that shows up for, friendly calls, for hangouts. Like, what is that me there? Becoming an influencer. This is definitely not the path to build a personal brand as an expert. You don't need to be a celebrity. You don't need to be someone that you are not. We're just looking at excavating who you already are and bring that clearly and strategically to the wider world. You also don't need to post every day to stay visible. I actually haven't posted in a week. Okay, that's not necessarily the best habit, but I haven't posted in a week, and still 120 of you raised your hand to be a part of this that are registered for today. That might not be how many are here right now, but just to say, you don't have to post every single day in order to be visible. It's not about volume, just like it's not about all the platforms, showing up on all the platforms. And you don't have to be louder than you already are. This ties into the one above. We're not looking to have you become someone that you are not. It's just excavating the way that is true to you and your personality and your expertise and how you want to show up. Some people are naturally loud and extrovert, and they leverage that as part of their personal brand. Others are introverts and they leverage that. You don't have to become anything that you already anything that you are not. So having dispelled some myths about what personal branding is not, it's also not about colors, logos, and fonts. It goes much deeper, and it's about your expertise, really. Now let's talk about what is a personal brand then. It's when someone looks you up, whether it's your LinkedIn profile or on Google, or they land on your website, or they hear your name. What is the association they make? What conclusion do they draw in just a few seconds? And it is just a few seconds. No one goes and browses around for 10, 20 minutes. You have to do that translation work for them and to be clear for them. They are forming an opinion and a perspective about you, whether you have built it intentionally or not. That already exists. So when someone lands on your profile today, can they clearly understand who you help, what you do, who you do it for, what makes you different, what's your unique perspective that sets you apart? So all of these things are working in the background, and they are forming your personal brand. Now, I'm also not a huge fan of like academic definitions for the sake of sounding smart. So being really practical, I want to share this with you, that personal branding is just helping strangers to correctly understand your value. And as an expert, building a business around your expertise, this is critical, that people who have never met us, that we are not having an actual conversation with, right? They're landing on our profile or our website. Can they correctly understand what you can do, your depth, your breadth, that you've done all these amazing things? Can they correctly understand that? Thank you so much, Corinne. I enjoy sharing this with you because this is what I wish someone would have made really crystal clear for me on day one when I started my business and it wasn't available. So I hope this really lands with you that it's not about being a celebrity or an influencer. Is we just need to be able to shape professional perception intentionally. That's all it is. And there's a difference between a resume and a personal brand. Many of you I know have a corporate background, so I really wanted to pause on this for a moment. This is a mistake people often make on their business website or their LinkedIn profile, is relying too much on our resume. In employment, it's okay to say, with 30 years experience in, and I've done all these things. And your resume, it really tells a story. It tells a story of I'm qualified, I have experience, I have achieved these things, these are my credentials, this is how long I've been doing it. It does tell a story, but a brand makes people care about it. It shapes how people perceive you. It builds authority and trust. And this is the key discrepancy is a resume. It demonstrates that we're qualified. It's great. By all means, have it there. I'm not saying erase it, but we cannot rely on it when we build a business around our expertise. Our personal brand, its job is to help us stand out as the person for this type of problem that we're really excellent at solving. It needs to help us be like memorable and make that as we just shared here earlier, or help strangers correctly perceive your value. So it's no longer about the list of things that we've done. It's understanding that value and communicating it in a simple, clear way that makes it memorable. Yes, that is reflecting your expertise and your depth, and also has you and your personality and your values in it, because that's part of what makes you unique compared to 100 people that do the same thing, 1,000 people that do the same thing as you. And I have a bone to pick with this one, because the advice around personal branding is, thank you so much, Tracy, finally. The advice is always the same. The problem with personal branding is every piece of advice, especially on LinkedIn, that you are given starts with the same place. Just show up more. Just promote yourself. Well, you should be growing an audience. Grow it faster. Can you get to 10K followers in 3 months? Wouldn't that be a great record? But why do we really need that? Be everywhere all at once. Be consistent. Show up more. And in and of itself, none of this is wrong. This can all be a part of building your personal brand, but the core advice that you're hearing over and over again, it misses a lot of the steps that should happen before this, before showing up. And my core message that I want to share with you today is why it feels scary to show up and build your personal brand is because you haven't done that work before to get to clarity and to know how to communicate your value clearly, because this is not a confidence issue. It's that gap, that foundation that is missing is what makes us feel insecure and ask ourselves, well, like, should I say it this way? Should I say it that way? Should I say what I want to say? Or should I say what people need to hear? How am I supposed to be showing up? So there's work that needs to be done before content that makes it so much easier to know how to show up and to show up confidently in a way that really feels true and aligned to us without becoming someone else. So here's my challenge and my issue with this type of advice is that when most of you have followed it and you still don't know how to communicate your value, you have tried to show up more and post more consistently and try to be everywhere, and it didn't bring the right clients, the right speaking opportunities, invitations to play at a bigger level. So something still feels off, and it's not because you did it wrong. It's because it wasn't in the right order. There are steps that are missing and that foundation that needs to be there first. So unless as an entrepreneur, your pipeline is completely full and your rates reflect your real value, well, the market is getting noisier by the day. AI is flooding every platform with a ton of content you can create, snapping your fingers, and more people are calling themselves experts in XYZ. And the women with the deepest expertise are somehow still the hardest to find. This is the part that's really frustrating, is we know you're great at what you do, so it shouldn't feel hard to communicate that to others. And in fact, in a few years, it will be actually very hard to start building your personal brand online because there will be so much fake AI generated video and content. How on earth will you break through that to build trust and to say, I'm a real person? Tim, so good to see you. And yes, clarity before action and alignment. I'm a big fan of showing up in a way that truly feels aligned, both professionally with our expertise and not watering it down, and also who we are as a person. Corinne, spot on. You don't have the foundation to leverage, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I really want to emphasize this point that in a couple of years, when most content will be fake AI videos, like written content is still going to get better. It will continue to be written by AI, but even videos, you won't be able to distinguish what's real and what's not. So how will you be building your personal brand in a couple of years when everything is flooded and it's really hard at that point to build trust? And even if you're doing work that you're proud of and your referrals, a business that is built on referrals is often, yes, the business functions, but when you can't generate that visibility online by yourself with new clients, strangers, remember strangers understanding your value, even when all that is true, it's not enough. Referrals can dry up and they don't really give you that independence. Networks, they also age out. So the next client shouldn't have to know someone who knows someone who knows you just to be able to find you. Because you have a voice, you have deep expertise that you want to share. And I want to help uncover some of those unspoken fears that are stopping you from showing up. So staying quiet, I know it feels safer. I also tried to hide my business, and I did for a whole year, but it definitely has a cost. So to get more clarity, to get more results, more proof before showing up. I know that feels responsible, but then staying invisible, it has a price that nobody puts on the table. And this is not abstract. Every month without a clear message is a month that you're competing on luck and referrals instead of positioning an authority. And you lose clients to people that are less qualified than you. Also, it impacts our revenue as business owners. We undercharge because we can't articulate our own value. And if we can't do that, our clients are not going to understand that value. So how can they pay for something that they don't understand? How can they choose something or someone that they don't clearly understand? And also time. I'm the best example here. I did hide my business from LinkedIn for a whole year. How much lost opportunity was in that? People that I could have helped that I never got to meet because they could not find me and there was nothing that said, here's what I do and what I can help with. So I want to emphasize this, that waiting to feel ready is not a strategy. Remember, it also took me 6 months to get myself to actually host these LinkedIn Lives, and it still feels just as scary the moment I go live as it did 6 months ago when I first had the idea. But it's not just like, well, just show up. There's work that needs to be done. And the waiting doesn't end on its own, because the feeling of readiness, it doesn't come from more time or from pep talk. It comes from clarity and strategy and implementation. And that doesn't happen by accident. So the real question is, well, why does showing up feel this hard when you already have everything it takes? And this one question, it drove me nuts for that 1 year when I didn't know how to show up. So I want to unpack 3 big areas that I've uncovered and go in depth with you today into this. So after working with dozens of female founders through their personal brand and their clarity, I've watched the same pattern play out every single time. The fear of showing up is not random. It follows a specific shape, and these 3 fears that really feed each other, very few people I've noticed really talk about it, because the advice was never built for us in the first place as experts. Because most personal branding advice is for creators who just need to entertain and go viral, and that's their main concern. That's not us. For expert founders, I found it's almost comes down to these 3 things. Is You've done so much. How on earth can you sum it up in a single tagline? How on earth can you put it into a post or a bio? You're afraid of becoming a reduced version of yourself or a simplified version of yourself. Then I found it's also, you know your stuff so deeply that having to communicate it in a simple way to where people understand it, it feels like dumbing it down in a way, watering it down. So, what if I show up and what I say doesn't do justice to what I actually know? That actually haunted me for a long time. But I realized I am not posting for my peers anymore. I am posting as a business owner for clients, for people I can help. I'm not posting for my former colleagues. So the shape of our expertise does need to change. The message does need to change. And then this is also a big one. When you've always shown up for someone else, you've always written for someone else, right? For your employer, if you come from corporate or academia, you wrote papers from that perspective. But now it's your turn on your own and you freeze because you're no longer speaking as the expert behind the work, behind someone else's structure, behind someone else's logo. Now you are the face of it. And how do I show up? What is my voice? Not the way I've always written. Like I've written so many reports and things. Writing was my main communication. But when I became a business owner, I was like, well, I don't have a voice. I don't have my own style. It was all corporate, formal, polished. So I'm very curious which one of these resonates the most with you. If you just want to type in the chat a number, what resonates with you the most? What feels like it's the most spot on for you? If you're okay sharing that. And then we're going to dive into each one of these. Super curious for your thoughts. Which one resonates the most? Just a quick number. Okay, getting a 1. I'm just really curious what lands the most, what hits home the most in here. Got a 3 as well. And I won't share that in public comments. Just, I know this goes to the heart of so many of our fears of showing up. Okay, first person, definitely hear you. So we're going to unpack every one of these to understand, to reframe these, not from a pep talk perspective, but to understand what is the work that we need to do to tackle each one of these, what is actually missing when we feel this type of fear coming up. So let's look at the first 1, 2, and 3. Okay, got a couple there. You've done so much. You're afraid to reduce it into just a tagline or a bio or a post because your work is layered. It is complex. Part of our expertise is that we understand depth and complexity. So putting it into a short tagline or a 300-character bio, it feels like lying about how deep our expertise actually goes. I'm getting a few more 3s. Okay, then we're going to spend more time in the 3. What personal branding? Also getting a 1 and more 3s. Okay, so why personal branding feels so uncomfortable for expert founders? Because for experienced experts, personal branding feels strangely uncomfortable at first because you've built depth across so many different dimensions. And when it's time to clarify, well, what do you want to be known for? It can feel like you're leaving parts of yourself out. Not because the positioning is wrong, but because your expertise is really bigger than a headline. All those years, different functions, industries that you've mastered. How does that become just a short tagline when it's like, well, that's not the full picture? So the real fear is actually not simplicity. I want to reframe this together. It's misinterpretation because, well, if I pick just one thing out of many that I've done, what that would actually ask you to do is like, well, do I just ignore 15 years of like, expertise across industries? Do I just pretend like I don't have breadth or depth? Is it now a liability where before I was reported for it, it was an asset? And how do I just reduce my value to just like a 200 character headline? How on earth do we do that? So I understand when people say and experts object on this, like, well, but I'm a complex human being. I'm not just one thing. And I have expertise that is complex. It is not just one thing. And I want to reframe this because when you look at it this way, the resistance actually completely makes sense. You're not being difficult. You're protecting something real. And the problem is that without a way to make your full range legible, you end up doing the opposite. It's trying to list everything and it loses people in the process. So this creates a very specific kind of internal hell for us as intellectuals and experts. You understand that strong personal brands actually do not communicate everything all at once equally. Every time someone tells you to pick one thing, something in you resists because you know that one thing is not the whole truth. So instead, then you try and describe everything. And then the headline becomes entrepreneur, author, expert, Six Sigma belt, all these certifications. And then the about section is trying to describe and hold 20 years in 2 paragraphs. And that feels wrong, right? It feels conflicting, but strong personal brands need a clear entry point. One thing to start the conversation with. It doesn't announce everything all at once. Yes, Corinne, 220 characters cannot describe your value. And a recognizable stance. It needs to start the thread, start the conversation with, remember, communicating our value to strangers in a way that is accurate. It needs to start that conversation, not to say everything all at once, because people become a follower or a client or they book a call when there is clarity, and then the depth comes after in layers, just like you have accumulated it in layers. So this is not an identity problem or a confidence problem. It's a translation. The complexity of what you do, it's real. The fear of losing it is real, but what's missing is not a simplification. It's a framework that makes your depth understandable without flattening it, without making it flat. So the advice says, well, pick one thing, but what you actually need is a way to make it all make sense. So rather than the question being, well, what's the one thing that I choose? The question should be, what is the through line that makes everything I've done make sense and position you stronger for that reason? So this is not simplification. This is positioning, and they're not the same thing. So I'm curious if there's any thoughts or questions here. I know most of you said fear number 3 is the biggest, but before we move on from this one, any big thoughts or questions before we go further? And I really wish LinkedIn would just allow me to see your comments in real time. For anyone that joined us a bit later, just bear in mind there's a few seconds of a delay between when I share my slides or I'm talking here in my office and when you hear that, and then when I hear your thoughts and your comments back. Okay, so Corinne is saying, what is your elevator pitch? Yes, that's another way to frame it, is we need that through line and a way to be able to clearly communicate our value, not all the things we've done and all the certifications and credentials we have, but what it means for someone and why we are a stronger choice, why we are the choice because of all those things that we've done, because of the complexity. But the elevator pitch never has to list the entire complexity. So love that framing there. Any thoughts or questions before we move on? Because I'm about to jump into the second one. And I know many of you want to dive deeper into the third one. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on? If not, you can also bring them back at the very end. I do want to stay on for a Q&A if there are questions. All right, so the second big thing is well, what if I show up and what I say doesn't do justice to what I actually know? This is a super common question when you know your stuff so deeply that simple feels like watering it down. And this is really the expert's paradox, to put it lightly, or the expert's curse. Um, is the deeper your knowledge, the harder it is to say anything in a way that feels good enough or feels like it honors your expertise. And this was one of the big things that kept me from showing up or posting anything in that first year when I was hiding my business. It's like, well, how do there's so much stuff in here to share. Again, how do we simplify without diluting? And this is the paradox that sits at the heart of why so many brilliant women stay quiet online. It's not that they have nothing to say, it's that they can see exactly how much gets lost when they try to say it simply. And you can see every caveat, every nuance, every way in which a simple post would fall short of the depth of what you know. Many of the women that have signed up for today, of the 120, I know you have PhDs. There is no way that it will feel like this post does justice to what you know. So that gap between the full picture in our head and the words that come out on the screen, on the keyboard, they feel like a betrayal of our expertise. And so simple communication, trying to convey that PhD level depth or that 20 years of expertise level of depth, I know it can feel like reducing that depth or misinterpreting, or it feels incomplete. It doesn't feel true to what we've built over decades, and it feels like it's irresponsible. So it's not a lack of just like being afraid of showing up. There is a real pragmatic aspect here that I want to unpack with you. So it could look like lack of confidence or just writer's block or lack of skill, which I understand if we're posting for the first few times, it's a real thing. But what it actually looks like, procrastination or perfectionism on the outside, it's actually a deeply felt professional standard. You know what excellence look like. You've operated at that level for years, decades, and producing something that doesn't meet it, it feels like misrepresenting everything you've built. That's not a mindset problem. That's a structural problem. You holding yourself to that level of expertise, and it feels like the average post cannot meet it, cannot communicate it. I get that part. I really do. But now you're stuck between either nothing goes out or what goes out feels frustratingly simple. So neither option works. And neither option will get you clients. That's the irony of it on top, right? So a strong personal brand is not about telling, again, coming back to it's not everything all at once communicated equally. It's communicating the depth of what you know. And those are completely different things. So when you're trying to say everything, it creates overwhelm for us, but also for the reader. So it's not about saying everything. It's how can we communicate that depth with authority on one topic at a time, with a clear structure in place, knowing exactly what should go into a post on this one topic that position me as an authority, because it's not about volume, just like it's not about volume to like, you don't have to be on all the platforms and you don't have to post every day. You don't have to put everything you know about that one topic into that one post for you to be an authority. That is done very intentionally in each post or each time we show up. So our audience doesn't need us to say everything. They just need to feel from the first sentence that you know more than what you're showing them. And that gap between what you say and what you hold back when it's intentional, it's not limitation. It's exactly what creates authority. And that's a completely different way to think about what your brand needs to do. Let me know if there's any thoughts or questions on this. I know we're close to time, and I definitely want to share the third one with all of you. Many of you mentioned that it's really the next piece that is a big one for you. But any thoughts or questions here before we move on? I know we only have a few more minutes, so I'm going to come back to any questions in a moment here. But many of you mentioned that you identify with this strongly. that you're no longer speaking as the expert behind the work, behind the logo, behind someone else's structure and credibility. Now you are the face of the work. And if you're building a business around your expertise, you truly are the face of that work. You are the product or service, not in a commodity demeaning type of way, but really people buy into you much more than they buy into just the approach, who you are as an expert. So the way you show up matters, the way you bring your voice across, your personality, your values in that one aspect, and then also pragmatically, the way you bring across your expertise, it matters because you are the face of it, and your prospects really do filter through that lens. But for most of your career, I know that your expertise, Tracy, authority feels good finally. I love that. I know that for most of your career, your expertise had a container, and this is the transition that almost nobody prepares you for, right? Think of that container. That was your career. When you leave, you start building something of your own and you expect the expertise to travel with you. It does to some extent, but the scaffolding that made the expertise visible, the institution, the logo, the name, the title, that doesn't come with you. So the company you were working for, it gave your expertise weight and credibility that you didn't have to create for yourself. You didn't have to stand for that. The name and the reputation of that, it made people say yes to a meeting even before you said a word. And your title, it told people how to treat you, how to perceive you. It positioned you as an authority, all of it combined. That was the container. And we take it for granted that that travels with us. But you operated inside that container. You knew how to be excellent inside this. This was my biggest fall from grace, so to say, when I left corporate, is that container is now gone and nobody warns you about what that would actually feel like. Because the silence that follows can feel like, well, the expertise, did that just disappear? Well, no, it didn't. But the bridge between you as an expert and a new audience that you are now trying to reach on your own, not through your employer, but on your own, that needs to be rebuilt from scratch. But that is the only thing that needs to be rebuilt. You're not starting from scratch as an expert. You're starting from scratch your communication channel, communicating your value, not your employer that you worked for in your career or in academia or in corporate. That container is gone. So you need to recreate that container. And my biggest message to you here is that that container does need to be built intentionally before showing up and before content becomes easy, fast, and before it feels right and it feels aligned. Yes, Corinne, the packaging is very important. So now that you're on your own and you don't have the company name behind you, the title to signal your level, the team that validates what you do, this is where most expert founders get stuck because they're trying to solve a brand problem with a confident solution. I don't know about you, but I don't think pep talk is a big strategy to build a business around. It's not about pushing yourself to post more, to show up more. It won't just wear off. Knowing how to communicate your expertise in a post on your profile, on your website, to position yourself as an expert in your offer, in your message, that does need the right foundation without which you cannot build trust. You just get noise. So the missing piece here is not courage. It's the infrastructure that makes a stranger understand in seconds why you are exactly who they need. That is a container that you no longer have. That's a container that you now need to build on your own. I did not realize this for a very long time. I didn't understand, like, why does it almost feel like I have nothing when I have a decade of expertise and all these other things? But guess what? Now in your business, you can't tell your prospects, well, I have 20 years experience and I'm accredited from this and this and this and this. Some of those are good checkbox to have. They're part of your expertise. They're part of your authority, but they're not the reason that someone goes from strangers to trusting you enough to say, I want to work with you. Can you help me? we need to do that translation work. So you're asking strangers, and this is maybe the most important slide in the entire time that we've covered today. You're asking strangers to correctly perceive your value without a structure that used to do that automatically in corporate, in academia, in your employment. That was done automatically for you through the reputation of your company, of the logos you worked with. That had its own weight and it did the work for you. And now strangers don't know why to trust you. How do they get to correctly understand you when you can't communicate your value? So you see how it's not a matter of post more and show up more or just get over the fear of showing up. Is we need a vehicle, we need a new container to be able to communicate our value. This is not a confidence problem. And I was stuck on it, trying to solve it in the wrong way for so long until I realized this is positioning. This is excavation work to understand what makes us unique. Why us? Why should someone choose you over 100 other providers that do the same thing without the reputation of a company behind you? So rebranding required. Yes, Corinne. I don't know about you, but this was one of the biggest hurdles for me, is to realize, what part do I need to rebuild from scratch? Not the expertise that's already there, but we need to translate it. We need to put it into a new container so people who have never heard of us and don't care about our former, employer background, etc., can choose us and can start to trust us. So I'd love your thoughts if there's anything you want to share at this point. What comes up for you when you think about it this way, when you're reframing why personal branding feels scary, why showing up feels scary? How does this reframe or rephrase that fear of showing up? Is because you haven't asked the right question yet. And I hope by now it's starting to really fall into place. The question that you were probably asking yourself before today, before this session, is like, how do I put myself out there? And most expert founders have never been asked the right question, which is why the answer isn't here yet. The real question is, well, what does someone need to understand about me before we ever speak to know that I'm the right person for them? How do I position myself? It's not, action doesn't come first here. Positioning needs to come first, and the foundation work. This is the translation skill, the translation work that needs to happen. It's not a personality trait. It's not a confidence issue, and you can't post yourself out of this one. It's foundational work that needs to be done. So it's not a visibility. You don't need to go viral, because more eyes on something that's not clear will not get you more clients. It's not a confidence problem of just do one more, just push yourself one more time. It's a translation thing. We have to build that container. Manila, thank you. This was definitely the goal, that the 3 big fears are not confined to confidence problems. This one took me so long. This was the most frustrating part in the whole thing, the whole nightmare I've gone through in the last few years. I thought it was my confidence. Like, well, why? I used to be really confident. You can't just lose that overnight. It's not the confidence that we lost overnight. It's the container. We need to rebuild now from scratch our own positioning to carry our own voice, our own authority, and we need to make a case in our own business now, on our own, with strangers, in public, to get our message across. So I really want to emphasize this distinction. That's the real picture. These 3 fears, they're not about confidence. It's not about spend more time figuring it out, DIYing it. You can use AI to some extent, but you will not excavate this on your own. It took me a lot of applying my own branding knowledge to myself, and a lot of additional, like 20K type of investment into myself, to understand, how do I translate what I know into a business that can stand on its own and work. And this is foundational work. So everything we talked about today, the fear of being reduced, the paralysis of knowing too much to say anything simple, that disorientation of showing up without the institutional weight behind us, every single one of them is fixable, not with a mindset shift, not with a yoga retreat, and not with a posting challenge. It's the right work done in the right order, because that's the part that nobody talks about, is the right order. Most personal branding, it starts at visibility. Just show up, post, be consistent. And that's what happens when you try to be visible without the foundation underneath it. But what I do, it starts before that, so you can show up. So what I want to share with you is that before you post a single word, you have to have a few things in place. 3 things specifically that give you that foundation. And this is the steps I take my clients through. 3 focus sprints, 1 building on the last, where we build your brand foundation together from the ground up, from the inside out, tackling each one of the fears that we just named. First is clarity. We figure out, who exactly are you in the market? Not 100 other people that do the same thing as you, but you. What makes you the only logical choice, and how to express it in a voice that sounds like you, not a simplified version of you. And then we build up your credibility, not the I've done 20 years of this and here are my credentials, but we build the positioning strategy, the signature framework, the offer structure, the ecosystem that lets you speak about your expertise with precision, so nothing gets lost in translation. And then finally, we tackle content. See how you were trying to start with content, most likely with showing up. And we build the content system and the new container that strategically allows you to show up consistently, faster, and easier with your full self and with your full expertise without feeling like you're becoming someone else. So if you knew exactly who you were in the market and had the language to express the full depth of what you know, and had a system that let you show up as yourself, would showing up still feel scary? I'm super curious on your take on this. And I want to leave you with one more thing as a gift, is a diagnostic assessment tool. In 3 minutes, totally free, you can find out which part are you stuck in. What exactly is keeping you stuck? So feel free to just grab the QR code, or the link is below. It's a free, really short, like 10-15 question personal brand diagnostic to identify, are you right now at a positioning challenge, or is messaging the missing piece? Are you ready to be visible because you've built all those things? What is the missing piece here? How is your authority perceived? How strong is your message and your offer? So you can use this to really see where you're at, what you need to work on next, and then you'll get a customized video that will walk you through those steps and what are the things that you should be focusing on, totally free. You just answer a few questions and it gives you that custom perspective. So really curious, what's one thing you're walking away from today that you're ready to do differently? So I virtually saw a lot of light bulbs go off in what you shared. That yes, Tracy, nobody cares about our certifications. In different industries, now if you're in like legal or finance, yes, certifications matter, but in and of itself, it's not the reason why someone chooses you. It just makes you a legitimate, I can have this conversation, I can give this type of help to someone, but that's not a reason why someone starts to build trust online. So super curious. What are you taking away from today that you can do different, or you're looking at from a new lens? Because a lot of you shared that in the comments, that authority, you want to bring your full expertise across, but there are big question marks around how to bring that into just a few words in your bio without watering it down. So really curious, what is your biggest takeaway? What do you see yourself doing different, or what do you see differently? I love the conversation between Tracy and Corinne here. Yes, people want results. So again, in some industries, legal and finance are the biggest ones that come to mind. A few others where certification and certain like specific things matter. but they only make you legitimate to be able to, like, it says that you're allowed to give this type of advice, but that's not what builds trust. And ultimately, that's not what tells you this person can get me the result I want. So really loved having you here. Feel free to reach out. I'm always curious to hear what resonated the most and what was the most helpful here today. And hope to see you next time. See you soon. Bye bye.